I'm Violetta, 29, sitting at my in-laws' glossy mahogany table when my phone vibrates. An unknown number. Don't react. They're recording you. My hand trembles, but I force a smile as Margaret asks about my work. That's when I notice Richard's unusual watch, the strange angle of Margaret's brooch, the new vase perfectly positioned to capture my voice. This wasn't paranoia. They were actually recording me. If you're watching this right now, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Hit that like button and subscribe. If you've ever had that gut feeling something wasn't right about a situation, trust me, this story might save you from the mistake I almost made. The morning had started like any other Sunday when we visited Andrew's parents. I'd spent extra time on my appearance, knowing Margaret's scrutinizing gaze would catch every flaw. A cream silk blouse, tailored navy slacks, pearl earrings that had been my grandmother's. Conservative enough for their taste, but still me. Andrew had watched me get ready with that half smile I'd fallen in love with 4 years ago. "You know you don't have to try so hard, right?" he said, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind as I applied mascara. "They already love you." I met his eyes in the mirror, fighting the urge to contradict him. After 3 years of marriage, we'd established a delicate peace on the topic of his family. He saw what he wanted to see, a loving family that had embraced his wife. I saw the reality, a wealthy, image-conscious clan that tolerated their son's choice while never truly accepting me. "I just want to look nice," I replied neutrally, applying a final coat of subtle pink lipstick. Andrew kissed my neck and went to warm up the car, leaving me alone with my thoughts. As the marketing director for Navaris Tech, a rapidly growing company specializing in secure communication software, I'd built my career on reading people and situations correctly. It was what made me good at my job, this ability to sense the undercurrents, to see the story behind the story. And everything about the past few weeks with Andrew's family felt off. My phone buzzed with a text from Taylor, my best friend since college, and the only person who truly understood my in-law situation. "Survival kit ready for Sunday lunch from hell. Remember. Smile deflect, escape to bathroom when needed." I smiled, tapping back a quick response. "Fully prepared. We'll call with full report later." Taylor had been my sounding board through every uncomfortable family gathering since Andrew and I had started dating 4 years ago. She'd helped me decode the subtext of Margaret's backhanded compliments and Richard's probing questions about my career. "Your apartment is so cozy. I suppose when you grow up with less, you learn to appreciate small spaces," Margaret had said during her first visit to my pre-marriage apartment. "That promotion came rather quickly, didn't it? I hope no one resents you for it," she'd remarked when I became the youngest marketing director in my company's history last year. Always smiling, always with plausible deniability, always leaving me feeling slightly diminished. Richard was more direct, a man accustomed to dominating rooms and conversations. His real estate development company had made him millions, allowing the family to live in an exclusive enclave of Westchester County, New York, in a house that could comfortably fit 6 families. From the moment Andrew had introduced us, Richard had treated me with a mix of curiosity and condescension, as if I were a mildly interesting specimen from another world. "Marketing," he'd said at our first meeting, rolling the word around his mouth like an unfamiliar food he wasn't sure he liked. "I suppose someone has to convince people to buy things they don't need." Then there was Eliza, Andrew's younger sister by 4 years. At 28, she lived a life of carefully curated leisure. Charity board memberships, yoga retreats, and a rotating cast of equally wealthy friends. She'd never worked a day in her life, and regarded my career ambition as a curious quirk, like keeping exotic pets. Against this backdrop, Andrew was the anomaly. Though raised in privilege, he'd chosen to make his own way as an architect, refusing his father's offers to join the family business. It was one of the things that had drawn me to him. This streak of independence, this desire to build something of his own. When we met at a charity gala, me there, representing my company, him dragged along by his mother, we'd connected over being the 2 people most uncomfortable in the room. "You're the only person here who's checked their watch more times than I have," he'd said, appearing at my elbow as I strategized my exit. 4 years later, I still remembered the warmth in his hazel eyes, the slightly crooked smile, the way he'd positioned himself between me and the crowd, as if offering protection. We'd talked until the servers began stacking chairs, and by the end of the night, I'd known something significant had begun. What I hadn't fully understood then was that loving Andrew meant dealing with his family, and that despite his professional independence, he remained emotionally tethered to them in ways that would repeatedly test our relationship. "Ready to go," Andrew called from downstairs, breaking my reverie. I took one last look in the mirror, squared my shoulders, and headed down to begin our weekly ritual. The drive to Westchester took 45 minutes, Andrew filling the time with casual conversation about work friends, the apartment renovation we were planning, deliberately avoiding any mention of the tension that always preceded these visits. As we passed through the ornate gates that marked the entrance to his parents' neighborhood, I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. "Hey," Andrew said, reaching for my hand as we pulled into the circular driveway. "It's just lunch, 4 hours max, and then we can go home and crack open that bottle of Cabernet we've been saving." I nodded, focusing on the reward at the end rather than the ordeal ahead. But as Andrew rang the doorbell, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about today was going to be different. The door swung open to reveal Margaret Hudson in all her polished glory. At 61, she remained striking. Her blonde hair expertly coloured and styled, her slim figure showcased in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Former beauty queen turned charity maven, she'd parlayed her looks and social connections into significant influence in certain circles. "Darlings," she exclaimed, ear-kissing Andrew before turning to me. "Violetta, you look lovely. That blouse brings out the warmth in your complexion." A compliment without a hidden barb. The first sign something was off. Richard appeared behind her, tall and imposing, even in casual Sunday attire. His handshake was firm, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "The architect and the marketing guru," he said, ushering us into the soaring foyer with its marble floors and crystal chandelier. "How's business, Violetta? That tech company of yours still growing?" "Novaris is doing well," I replied carefully. "We've had a strong quarter." "I read something about a possible acquisition." Richard continued, leading us into the formal living room where Eliza was already perched on an antique settee. "Are you involved in that decision-making?" I felt Andrew tense beside me. My company's potential acquisition of a smaller security software firm had been rumoured in industry circles, but not officially announced. The fact that Richard knew about it, and was asking so directly, sent a small warning flare. "Dad, you know, Violetta can't discuss confidential company business," Andrew interjected before I could respond. Richard raised his hands in mock surrender. "Just making conversation. I like to keep up with what's happening in different sectors." Eliza rose to greet us, her usual cool demeanour replaced by unexpected warmth. "Violetta, I love those earrings vintage." "They were my grandmother's," I replied, surprised by her interest. "So special to have family pieces," she said, touching my arm lightly. "Come sit by me. I want to hear all about that marketing campaign you mentioned last time, the one that increased user engagement." I exchanged a quick glance with Andrew as I followed Eliza to the seating area. In 3 years of family gatherings, she had never once asked about my work. The sudden interest felt calculated, though I couldn't immediately determine why. As Margaret directed the conversation through lunch preparations and into the dining room, I observed the Hudson family dynamics with growing unease. Everything looked the same. The perfectly appointed dining room, the formal table setting the catered meal served on heirloom china. But the underlying currents had shifted. Richard, normally content to dominate conversation with stories of his business triumphs, was unusually focused on me. Margaret, typically more interested in society gossip than my career, kept steering the conversation back to Novaris. Even Eliza, who usually spent family meals half absorbed in her phone, was attentive and engaged. Only Andrew seemed normal, or rather exhibited his usual Sunday family lunch behaviour, slightly tense, occasionally defensive, consistently running interference when conversations veered towards sensitive topics. But I noticed he checked his phone more frequently than usual, a small furrow appearing between his brows each time. "So the acquisition would give Novaris access to quantum encryption technology, is that right?" Richard asked, as the main course was served, his new watch glinting under the chandelier light. "I really can't discuss the details," I said with a practiced smile, "but I'd love to hear about your new development project." Andrew mentioned something about sustainable building materials. Richard waved away my deflection. "Oh, that's still in the planning stages. Nothing as exciting as what's happening at Novaris. The tech sector is where the real innovation is happening. The real money too, I'd imagine." Speaking of innovation, Margaret interjected, adjusting an ornate brooch I'd never seen before. "Violetta, you must have access to all sorts of information about emerging technologies through your position. Do you ever get to influence investment decisions?" The question landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of alarm through me. In all our previous interactions, Margaret had treated my career as a quaint hobby, something I did before eventually focusing on what she considered women's real purpose, family, and social management. Her sudden interest in my professional access and influence felt calculated and concerning. I was formulating a suitably vague response when my phone vibrated in my lap. Glancing down discreetly, I saw a text from an unknown number. "Don't react. They're recording you." Tight. My heart lurched, but I forced my expression to remain neutral as I placed my phone face down on my lap. Margaret was watching me closely, her head tilted in a way that made her brooch point directly at me. "Violetta," she prompted. "Investment decisions." "I'm in marketing." I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "Investment strategies are handled by our finance team and executive leadership." As the conversation continued around me, I became hyper-aware of details I'd initially overlooked. Richard's unusual watch, with what appeared to be a small lens on its face. Margaret's strategically positioned brooch. The new decorative vase placed at the center of the table at an odd angle. Even Eliza's persistent questions suddenly made sense. They were creating opportunities for me to reveal information. My in-laws weren't just being unusually interested in my career. They were recording me in hopes of extracting valuable information about Novaris's confidential acquisition plans. The realization made me feel physically ill, but even more disturbing was the implication: Andrew's strange behavior, his frequent phone checking, his nervous energy. Did he know? Was my own husband complicit in this attempt to use me? I needed space to think, to process this betrayal. Excusing myself to use the restroom, I clutched my phone like a lifeline as I walked down the hallway on unsteady legs, wondering who had sent the warning text and how much worse this Sunday lunch was about to become. Once safely locked in the powder room, I leaned against the marble vanity and took several deep breaths, trying to calm my racing heart. The ornate gold-framed mirror reflected a woman who appeared composed on the outside while crumbling within. I checked my phone again, staring at the message from the unknown number. As I did, another text arrived. "Richard's watch, Margaret's brooch vase on credenza. All recording devices. They want info on your company's acquisition. Andrew knows." Those last two words hit me like a physical blow. Andrew knows. My husband, my partner, the person I trusted most in the world, was aware his family was attempting to record me for corporate espionage. I gripped the edge of the sink, suddenly dizzy. With trembling fingers, I typed back, "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared then. "Someone who thinks this is wrong. We'll explain later. For now, be careful what you say. They're desperate." I set my phone down and splashed cold water on my face, careful not to disturb my makeup. I needed to think clearly. The corporate security training I'd received at Novaris came flooding back. How to identify potential information security risks, how to handle suspected espionage attempts, the legal implications of insider trading. If my in-laws were recording me to gain insider information about Novaris's acquisition plans, they weren't just betraying my trust. They were potentially committing securities fraud. And if Andrew knew, I couldn't complete the thought. Instead, I focused on immediate action. First, I needed to confirm the recording devices. Then I needed to get through the rest of this lunch without revealing anything valuable. Finally, I needed to confront Andrew, away from his family. Taking another steadying breath, I exited the bathroom and took a deliberate wrong turn, finding myself in Richard's study. The door was ajar, and I slipped inside, knowing I had only moments before my absence would be noted. The room smelled of leather and expensive cologne walls lined with business awards and photos of Richard, with various political figures and celebrities. On his desk sat an array of high-end electronics. The man had always been fond of gadgets. A quick search on my phone confirmed my suspicions about the items mentioned in the text. Richard's watch was a nearly $3,000 executive security device, with high-definition recording capabilities disguised as a luxury timepiece. Similar brooch cameras were available for corporate protection. These weren't improvised recording devices. They were professional-grade surveillance equipment. My stomach churned with betrayal as I hurried back toward the dining room, plastering a smile on my face as I rounded the corner. "Sorry for the delay," I said lightly. "Just had to make a quick call to check on a work issue." "Nothing serious, I hope," Richard said, his eyes sharper than before. "Just a minor question from one of my team members," I replied, settling back into my chair. I noticed Andrew wouldn't meet my eyes, confirming my worst fears. He knew. He had always known. With new awareness, I observed the family dynamics around the table. Richard was steering the conversation with the precision of a conductor, creating openings for me to discuss confidential information. Margaret watched me with laser focus, subtly adjusting her brooch whenever I spoke. Eliza asked follow-up questions designed to extract specifics. And Andrew sat there occasionally checking his phone, a participant through his silence. Violetta, Richard began as dessert was served. Hypothetically speaking, if Novaris does acquire Quantum Shield, what might that mean for your company's market position? Would you expect to see a significant jump in stock value? The question was so blatant, so obviously fishing for actionable investment information, that I almost laughed despite the situation's gravity. Hypothetically speaking, I replied carefully, any company making any significant acquisition would expect some market reaction. But as I mentioned, I'm not involved in those decisions and wouldn't have insight into potential market movements. Richard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. But surely, as a senior marketing executive, you'd be briefed on how to position such a move to the public, timing, messaging, that sort of thing. Dad, Andrew finally interjected, you're putting Violetta in an uncomfortable position. She's bound by confidentiality agreements. I'm just making conversation, Richard insisted, though his tone had hardened. No one's asking for state secrets here, but that was exactly what he was doing, and now I knew why. With forced calm, I checked the time on my own watch, a simple timepiece that didn't spy on people. Andrew, we should probably get going soon. I have that early meeting tomorrow to prepare for. Andrew looked relieved at the escape route. Right, yes, we should head out. Margaret's disappointment was palpable. But we haven't even had coffee yet, and I was hoping to show Violetta the new garden installation. Another time, I said firmly, standing up. Thank you for lunch. It was illuminating. The drive home began in tense silence. Andrew kept both hands on the wheel, his knuckles white with tension. I stared out the window, processing everything I'd learned and deciding how to approach the confrontation that was inevitable. You're quiet, Andrew finally said as we merged onto the highway. Did something happen? The casual deception in his question was the final straw. 3 years of marriage, 4 years together, all the promises we'd made, and he could lie to my face this easily. Did something happen? I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. Yes, Andrew, something happened. I discovered that your family was recording me during lunch, that they were trying to extract confidential information about my company, and that you knew about it. The colour drained from his face, but he didn't deny it. Instead, he signalled and pulled over to the shoulder of the highway, putting the car in park before turning to me. It's not what you think, he began. The most cliché defence of betrayal. Really, because I think your parents were using surveillance equipment to record me in hopes of getting insider information about Novaris's acquisition plans. I think they were planning to use that information for financial gain, and I think you were aware of it the entire time. Andrew ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of stress I'd seen countless times during our relationship. But now it struck me as manipulative, a way to appear vulnerable when confronted. How did you find out? He asked instead of denying my accusations. Does it matter? The point is I know. He sighed heavily, staring straight ahead through the windshield. Dad's company is in trouble, he finally said. Serious trouble. The Westlake development fell through and he leveraged everything on it. They could lose everything. The house, the lifestyle, all of it. So your solution was to commit securities fraud. My voice rose despite my efforts to remain calm. To use me. I didn't want to, Andrew protested, turning to face me. When Dad first approached me, I refused. Told him it was insane, illegal, and a betrayal of you. But he was desperate, Violetta. You don't understand what it's like for them. The prospect of losing everything they've built. And what about what we've built? Our marriage, my career, my freedom. Did you think about what would happen to me if this came out? Andrew had the decency to look ashamed. I thought no harm would come of it. That you'd never know, that you wouldn't say anything specific enough for them to act on anyway. That it would be a failed attempt and Dad would move on. So you decided to participate in this scheme rather than warn me, rather than stand up to your father, rather than, I don't know, suggest legal ways to address his financial problems. It wasn't that simple, he insisted. Dad's been helping us too, Violetta. The down payment for our apartment, our renovation budget. Where do you think that money came from? The revelation hit me hard. We'd purchased our Manhattan apartment 2 years ago, with Andrew insisting we could afford the hefty down payment through his savings. The ongoing renovation had stretched our budget, but again, Andrew had assured me we could manage it. Are you saying your father paid for our home? My voice was barely audible over the sound of passing traffic. Andrew nodded miserably. Part of it. A significant part. And the renovation costs. Those too. Why didn't you tell me? Because you're so independent. So proud of making your own way. I was afraid you'd refuse, that we'd lose the apartment you love so much. So you lied. about our finances, about your family's involvement in our lives. And now about this. Andrew reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I was trying to protect you, he insisted. Keep you separated from all this. If you didn't know about the recording, you couldn't be implicated if anything went wrong. That's not protection, Andrew. That's control. That's deception. I stared at him, suddenly seeing our entire relationship in a new light. This isn't the first time, is it? That they've tried to use me for information. His silence was confirmation enough. All those dinners where your father asked about my work, the charity events where I was seated next to tech investors, your mother's sudden interest in my colleagues. Each memory reframed itself in my mind, revealing a pattern I'd been too trusting to see. How long, Andrew? How long have they been trying to extract information from me? It wasn't always about insider information, Mick, he said weakly. Sometimes it was just contacts, introductions, industry trends. How long? Since we got engaged, he admitted. When Dad realized you were going to be part of the family permanently, he saw it as an opportunity. 3 years. For 3 years, my in-laws had viewed me not as a person, not as their son's wife, but as an access point to valuable information. And Andrew had allowed it, facilitated it, lied about it. I want you to take me to a hotel, I said, my decision crystallizing. I can't go home with you right now. I can't even look at you. Violetta, please. We can work through this. I'll tell Dad it's over, that I won't participate anymore. It's a little late for that, don't you think? The damage is done. I turned away from him, staring out the passenger window at the cars speeding past, each one filled with people living their lives unaware that mine was imploding. Take me to a hotel, Andrew. I need space to think. He started the car without further argument. The silence between us now filled with all the trust that had been broken and all the words we couldn't say. The hotel room was impersonal but clean. A standard king bed, generic artwork on the walls, a desk by the window overlooking the city. I'd chosen a Marriott near my office, paying with my own credit card, despite Andrew's insistence that he would cover it. I needed complete separation from him, from his family, from the financial entanglements I hadn't even known existed until today. As soon as Andrew left, after multiple attempts to continue the conversation that I firmly shut down, I called Taylor. Well, that was fast, she answered, her voice cheerful. Sunday lunch from hell, end early today, or did you escape to the bathroom to call me? Taylor, I said, my voice breaking on her name. Her tone immediately changed. Via, what happened? Are you okay? No, I admitted as the tears finally came. I'm not okay. I'm at a hotel. I can't go home right now. I'm on my way, she said without hesitation. Text me the address, 20 minutes tops. While waiting for Taylor, I forced myself to be practical. I contacted my company's IT security team, explaining I had reason to believe I might have been recorded discussing company matters. I was vague about the details, but clear about the potential security breach. They promised to immediately revoke any access credentials that might have been compromised and to launch a review of my recent communications. Next, I called my brother Michael, a cybersecurity expert who worked for a major financial institution. If anyone could trace the anonymous text sender, it would be him. This better be important, he grumbled on answering. I'm in the middle of a Dungeons & Dragons campaign that's been planned for months. My in-laws were secretly recording me at lunch today, trying to get insider information about Navaris, and Andrew knew about it, I said without preamble. There was a moment of stunned silence, then, holy shit, Vio, are you serious? Completely. I need your help. Someone texted me a warning from an unknown number. I need to find out who it was. Where are you now? His voice had shifted to professional mode. A hotel. I couldn't go home with him. Good call. I'm coming over after I finish here. 2 hours max. Don't respond to any communications from Andrew or his family. Don't access any shared accounts if you can avoid it. And Vio, I'm really sorry this is happening. By the time Taylor arrived bearing an overnight bag with essentials and a bottle of wine, I had moved from shock to a cold, clear anger. Okay, tell me everything, she said, pouring us each a glass of Cabernet, ironically the same varietal Andrew and I had planned to enjoy after our normal family lunch. I recounted the entire experience, the unusual interest from my in-laws, the mysterious text, the discovery of the recording devices, Andrew's confession in the car. Taylor listened without interrupting, her expression darkening with each new detail. That manipulative, spineless mama's boy. She finally exploded when I finished. I never trusted him, Vio. He always seemed too perfect, too accommodating. Now we know why. He was using you the whole time. I don't think it started that way, I said, surprising myself by defending him. I think he really did love me, still does love me in his way, but he never cut the cord with his family. When they saw me as an asset rather than a person, he was too weak to stand up to them. That's not love, Taylor said firmly. Love doesn't use people. Love doesn't lie for years. Love doesn't put someone at legal risk without their knowledge or consent. She was right, of course. Whatever Andrew felt for me, it wasn't the partnership I thought we had built. What will you do now? She asked, refilling our glasses. I don't know yet. Legally protect myself first and foremost. Make sure Navarus knows I didn't knowingly compromise anything. After that, I trailed off the future, suddenly a blank page I wasn't ready to write on. You can stay with me as long as you need, Taylor offered. The sofa pulls out, and Mark won't mind. I nodded gratefully, though I knew a hotel would be better for now. Taylor's one-bedroom apartment shared with her boyfriend would quickly feel cramped. Besides, I needed neutral space to think. My phone buzzed with a text from Andrew. The 5th since I'd checked in. I ignored it like the others. I keep thinking about who sent that warning text, I said, staring at my phone. Someone who knew what Richard and Margaret were planning. Someone with my number. Someone who wanted to protect me. Could it have been Eliza? Taylor suggested. Maybe she grew a conscience. I shook my head. Eliza's always been fully aligned with her parents. Besides, she was part of the information extraction team today. A member of the household staff. Possibly, but how would they have my number? And why would they care? My phone buzzed again this time, with a call from an unknown number. The same one that had sent the warning texts. I showed Taylor the screen. Answer it, she urged. Put it on speaker. I accepted the call, my heart pounding. Hello, Violetta, a male voice I vaguely recognized, but couldn't immediately place. It's Jackson, Margaret's nephew. We met at your company presentation last month. The memory clicked into place. A quiet, intense young man in his early 30s who had approached me after my presentation at a tech conference. He'd mentioned being Margaret's nephew, but had seemed almost embarrassed by the connection. Jackson, I repeated. You sent the texts? Yes. Look, I know this is strange, but I need to talk to you in person. There's more you need to know about what Richard and Margaret are planning, and it's not safe to discuss over the phone. I glanced at Taylor, who raised her eyebrows and mouthed, "Trap." Why should I trust you? I asked Jackson. For all I know, you're part of whatever scheme they're running. I understand your suspicion, he replied. But I'm the one who warned you. Remember, I've been uncomfortable with Uncle Richard's business practices for years. When I overheard their plan to record you, I couldn't stay silent. How did you even know they were planning this? I was at their house yesterday, helping Richard with some IT security for his home office. He and Margaret were discussing it in the study, didn't realize I could hear. I'm not part of their inner circle. They don't fully trust me because I've questioned some of their methods in the past. His explanation matched the genuine discomfort I'd sensed when we'd met briefly at the conference. Jackson had seemed like someone operating at the edges of his family's orbit, connected but not fully integrated. Where do you want to meet? I asked, making a decision. There's a coffee shop called Bluestone on 32nd Street. Public busy enough to blend in, but quiet enough to talk. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. I'll be there. I agreed. After hanging up, Taylor looked at me with concern. Are you sure about this? It could be another trap. It's a public place, and you and Michael can be nearby, I reasoned. Besides, my instincts say he's telling the truth. He seemed uncomfortable with his family connections when we met before. Michael arrived an hour later, laptop bag in hand, and determined expression on his face. My older brother by 4 years, he had always been my protector, from playground bullies to college boyfriends he deemed unworthy. When I'd introduced him to Andrew, he'd been cautiously approving, but had warned me that old money families often had different values. How right he had been. I traced the number, he announced without preamble. It's registered to a Jackson Whitfield. Mean anything to you? Margaret's nephew? I confirmed. He just called. We're meeting tomorrow morning. Michael nodded, setting up his laptop on the desk. I'll come with you. Meanwhile, I need access to your devices to make sure they haven't been compromised. While Michael worked his technical magic, Taylor helped me make a list of immediate concerns and action items. By midnight, we had a planned meet with Jackson to learn the full extent of the situation, consult with a lawyer specializing in securities law, and schedule a formal meeting with Navarus's legal and security teams. The personal side, what to do about my marriage, I left blank for now. That wound was too raw, the betrayal too fresh to make life-altering decisions yet. After Taylor and Michael left with promises to meet me the next morning before the Jackson meeting, I lay awake in the unfamiliar hotel bed, my mind racing. I thought about the day Andrew had proposed a private moment in Central Park after a rainstorm, the air clean and new, the wet leaves glistening in the returning sunlight. "You make me want to be a better man," he'd said down on one knee, with a ring that I now wondered if his father had helped pay for. "You make me feel like I can build something that's truly mine, truly ours." Had it all been a lie? Or had he meant it, then only to slowly succumb to his family's influence? And if he'd betrayed me in this monumental way, what other betrayals might be hidden in our shared history? As dawn broke over the city, I finally drifted into a restless sleep, dreams filled with recording devices and whispered conversations just beyond my hearing. Bluestone Coffee was a small industrial chic cafe tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop. I arrived 15 minutes early, securing a table in the back corner that gave me a clear view of the entrance, while providing some privacy for conversation. Michael and Taylor positioned themselves at the counter, pretending not to be with me, but keeping me in their sightlines. I ordered a double espresso, needing the concentrated caffeine after my nearly sleepless night. My phone had accumulated 23 texts and 8 missed calls from Andrew overnight, his messages evolving from apologetic to increasingly desperate. I had responded only once, a brief text informing him I was safe, but needed space and would contact him when I was ready. His parents had also called twice, which I found both audacious and revealing. Clearly, Andrew had told them I knew about their scheme. Jackson arrived precisely at 8, scanning the cafe until he spotted me. He looked different from our brief conference interaction, more tense, less polished in jeans and a rumpled button-down rather than the business attire he'd worn before. He was carrying a laptop bag similar to my brother's, the strap clutched tightly in his hand. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "But I need to understand what's happening." He nodded, ordering black coffee when the server approached. Once we were alone again, he leaned forward, his voice low. "How much did Andrew tell you about Richard's financial situation? Just that his business is in trouble, that the Westlake development fell through and he could lose everything." Jackson gave a bitter laugh. "That's the sanitized version. The truth is much worse. Uncle Richard isn't just facing a business setback. He's potentially facing criminal charges. The Westlake development involves some creative accounting that's drawn attention from regulatory authorities. He needs a major influx of cash to both save the business and pay for the legal defense he's assembling." This was significantly worse than Andrew had indicated, and he thought insider trading based on information extracted from me was the solution. "It's not the first time," Jackson said, confirming my worst suspicions. "Uncle Richard has been using family connections for insider information for years, usually more subtly. Social events, seemingly casual conversations, building relationships with people in positions to know things. But recently he's become more desperate, more direct." "How do you know all this?" Jackson sighed, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. "I used to work for him, in the IT department of his company. I saw things, documents I wasn't supposed to see, heard conversations that weren't meant for me. When I raised concerns, he assured me everything was standard business practice. But I knew better. So you left. 6 months ago, started my own IT security consultancy, but I still get called in occasionally when he needs technical help he can trust to be discreet. That's how I overheard the plan to record you." He opened his laptop, turning it so I could see the screen. "I've been documenting everything for the past year. Questionable transactions, potential securities violations, conversations that indicated knowledge he shouldn't have had. I was building a case, trying to decide what to do with it." The screen displayed a meticulously organized folder system labeled by date and type of potential violation. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Because you need to understand what you're dealing with. Richard isn't just a desperate businessman trying a one-time unethical shortcut. He's someone who's operated in the grey areas of securities law for years and is now crossing firmly into illegal territory. And he's involving you and your husband in it." I flinched at the mention of Andrew. "What exactly did you overhear about their plan regarding me?" Jackson took a sip of his coffee, grimacing at its temperature or taste. "They knew about Novaris's planned acquisition of Quantum Shield weeks ago, through some other source, not you. But they needed confirmation of the timing and details to make their investment moves. The plan was to record you answering seemingly innocent questions, edit the recordings if necessary, to create usable sound bites, and use that to time their investments. That's insane, I whispered, the full implications hitting me. That's not just unethical, it's criminal. Yes, Jackson agreed grimly. And they've pulled similar stunts before. There's a pattern here. And Andrew, what was his role supposed to be? Jackson hesitated, sympathy flashing across his features. From what I overheard, Andrew was reluctant, but eventually agreed to bring you to lunch and not warn you about the recording. He drew the line at directly asking you questions himself. That's why Richard and Margaret were so aggressive with their inquiries. SEN. Even in betrayal, Andrew had maintained some small boundary. It wasn't much comfort. There's something else you should know, Jackson continued. They're under investigation. The SEC has been looking into some of Richard's previous investment patterns. That's part of why he's so desperate now. He needs money for legal representation and to potentially settle charges without admitting wrongdoing. My espresso sat forgotten on the table, cold and undrinkable now. Why are you telling me all this? Why did you warn me you're risking your relationship with your family? Jackson's expression hardened slightly. I've spent my whole life on the periphery of the Hudson family, watching Richard and Margaret operate by their own rules. My mother, Margaret's sister, always told me to be grateful for their help, their connections, their occasional financial support. But there was always a price, always strings attached. I've been trying to break free of their influence for years. He closed his laptop carefully. When I heard them planning to record you, to potentially implicate you in securities fraud, I couldn't stay silent. No one deserves to be used that way. Thank you, I said simply, for the warning, for this meeting, for helping me understand what I'm dealing with. What will you do now? He asked. Protect myself first and foremost. Meet with my company's legal team. Make sure they know I wasn't complicit. I paused, the next step still unclear. After that, I don't know. Jackson nodded, then reached into his bag and pulled out a USB drive. This has copies of everything I've documented. It might help you, or the appropriate authorities, understand the scope of what's happening. I accepted the drive, suddenly feeling the weight of decisions yet to be made. This could destroy them. Richard, Margaret, Andrew. They made their choices, Jackson said not unkindly. Now you have to make yours. I shall you out. As we prepared to leave, he added, Be careful, Violetta. Richard won't take this setback lightly. When he realizes his plan has failed, he might become more desperate, more dangerous. Dangerous how? I don't think he'd ever resort to physical harm, Jackson clarified. But character assassination, professional sabotage, absolutely. I've seen him destroy people who crossed him. With that unsettling warning, we parted ways, Jackson declining my offer to cover his coffee with a wry smile and a comment about finally buying his own way. Michael and Taylor joined me as soon as he left, eager for details. So, Michael prompted, is he legit? Very, I confirmed. And the situation is worse than I thought. Much worse. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of meetings and decisions. I met with Navarro's legal team, providing a full account of what had happened and handing over Jackson's USB drive as evidence. They were alarmed but supportive, immediately putting protective measures in place around the pending acquisition information and launching a thorough review of any systems or documents I had accessed. Based on our investigation so far, it doesn't appear any material information was compromised, the lead counsel assured me. Your awareness of the situation and quick reporting helped contain any potential damage. I also consulted with a personal attorney specializing in securities law who advised me on how to completely distance myself from Richard's activities and protect my professional reputation. Andrew continued his campaign of calls and texts, eventually escalating to appearing at my office building, where security politely but firmly turned him away. I wasn't ready to face him to hear more excuses or explanations. Each time I considered responding, I remembered Jackson's words. They made their choices. Okay. Instead, I focused on practical matters, arranging for Taylor to collect some essential items from my apartment when Andrew was at work, opening a separate bank account for my salary deposits, and consulting with a therapist who specialized in relationship trauma. Throughout this period, Taylor and Michael remained my unwavering support system. Taylor offered her sofa for as long as I needed, while Michael helped secure my digital life-changing passwords and checking for any unauthorized access to my accounts. He accessed your laptop several times over the past month, Michael informed me after his digital forensics work. Nothing too invasive, mainly email skimming, checking your calendar for meetings related to the acquisition. Even this relatively minor invasion felt like another betrayal. My laptop had been password protected, which meant Andrew had either watched me enter it or had guessed it based on his knowledge of me. Either way, he had deliberately violated my privacy. 5 days after the fateful Sunday lunch, I finally agreed to meet with Andrew. Not at our apartment. I wasn't ready to return to that space we had shared, but at a small park near my office, public enough to discourage any emotional outbursts, but private enough for a difficult conversation. He was already waiting when I arrived, sitting on a bench with his shoulders hunched against a brisk autumn breeze. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing the same blue sweater I'd seen him in twice before. When he spotted me, he stood quickly, his expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Violetta," he said my name, almost a prayer on his lips. "Thank you for meeting me. I've been so worried. I told you I was safe," I replied, sitting on the bench and indicating he should do the same. I maintained careful distance between us, unwilling to risk even the familiar comfort of his physical proximity. "I know, but..." He trailed off, apparently realizing there was no good way to finish that sentence. "I've learned quite a bit more since Sunday," I said, getting straight to the point. "About your father's business practices, about the extent of the plan to record me, about the multiple times you accessed my laptop without permission." He flinched at the last accusation. "How did you..." "Does it matter? The point is you've been systematically betraying my trust for longer than I initially realized. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment, Andrew. This was a pattern." "I know," he admitted, staring down at his hands. "I know it looks bad. It doesn't just look bad, it is bad. It's potentially criminal. It's definitely unethical. And it's absolutely a betrayal of our marriage vows." He was silent for a long moment, the sounds of the city continuing around us. Traffic, distant conversations, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. "I've been talking to a therapist," he finally said, "every day since you left, trying to understand why I did this, why I couldn't stand up to my parents, why I risked everything we built together. Under different circumstances, I might have been proud of him for taking that step. Now it felt like too little, too late. And what insights have you gained?" I asked, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from my voice. "That I've never developed a healthy sense of self separate from my family. That I've been seeking my father's approval my whole life. That I've used manipulation and avoidance to manage conflict because that's what I learned growing up." He looked up at me, his hazel eyes filled with tears. "None of that excuses what I did, but I'm trying to understand it so I don't repeat these patterns." "That's good," I acknowledged. "Self-awareness is important. But Andrew, understanding why you betrayed me doesn't undo the betrayal." "I know," he said quickly. "I know. I just want a chance to make things right, to rebuild your trust, to be the husband you deserve. And what about your parents? Have you spoken to them?" His expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "Yes, I told them what they did was wrong, that they potentially put you at legal risk, that I wouldn't participate in any more schemes." "How did they respond?" "Dad was angry. Said I was overreacting, that no harm was done since they didn't get any usable information. Mom cried, said they were just trying to save the family legacy. Of course they had minimized it, reframed themselves as victims rather than perpetrators. It was exactly what I would have expected." "And you?" I pressed. "What did you say when they tried to justify their actions?" Andrew hesitated, and in that pause I had my answer. "You didn't confront them," I realized. "Not really. You expressed mild disapproval, but didn't hold them accountable. It's complicated, Violetta. They're my parents. I understand. And I'm your wife. I'm the person you promised to love and protect, the person you chose to build a life with." My voice rose despite my best efforts to remain calm. "If you can't set boundaries with them, even after this, what hope is there for us?" A couple walking nearby glanced in our direction, and I forced myself to take a deep breath to lower my voice. "I need more time," I said. "This isn't a decision I can make right now while I'm still processing everything." "What can I do?" Andrew asked, desperation evident in his tone. "Tell me what you need from me." I considered his question carefully. "Right now, space, respect for my boundaries, and complete honesty. No more secrets, no more half-truths, no more protecting me by keeping me in the dark." He nodded quickly. "Anything else?" "Yes, I need you to really think about your relationship with your parents. Not just surface-level recognition of unhealthy patterns, but deep, honest reflection on whether you're capable of putting our relationship first. because I won't return to a marriage where I'm constantly competing with your family for loyalty." Andrew looked stricken, but nodded again. "I understand. And Violetta, I am so sorry for everything." As we parted ways, I felt no clearer about what the future held for us. The love was still there, buried beneath layers of hurt and betrayal, but love alone wasn't enough to rebuild what had been broken. Trust once shattered couldn't be restored with apologies and promises. It would require consistent, demonstrable change, if I even decided to give him that chance. Walking back to my office, I realized that regardless of what happened with Andrew, I had already changed. The Violetta who had walked into Sunday lunch was gone, replaced by someone more cautious, more clear-eyed about human nature, more determined to protect herself. Whether that change would lead to the end of my marriage or the beginning of something stronger remained to be seen. For now, all I could do was continue putting one foot in front of the other, trusting my instincts and the support of those who had proven their loyalty. The next 2 weeks brought a cascade of developments, both professional and personal. At Novaris, the planned acquisition of Quantum Shield proceeded smoothly with extra security measures in place to prevent information leaks. My role in uncovering a potential corporate espionage attempt earned me the respect of senior leadership who appreciated my integrity and quick action. "You handled a difficult situation admirably," my CEO told me during a private meeting. Not everyone would have reported something that implicated their family members. Meanwhile, the evidence Jackson had provided about Richard's questionable business practices found its way to the appropriate regulatory authorities, though I wasn't directly involved in that process. According to Michael, who had contacts in financial crimes investigation, Richard Hudson was now the subject of a formal SEC inquiry. My parents, who lived in Arizona and had never been entirely comfortable with Andrew's wealthy family, flew in to offer support once I finally told them what had happened. My mother, pragmatic as always, helped me organize my finances and create a plan for either reconciliation or separation. My father, typically more emotionally reserved, surprised me with his gentle wisdom. "Marriage isn't just about love butterfly," he said using my childhood nickname. "It's about character. About how someone behaves when things are difficult, when making the right choice costs something." Their visit provided much-needed perspective and reminded me that family could be a source of strength rather than manipulation. I had moved from the hotel to Taylor's apartment, then to a small sublet I found through a work colleague. It wasn't home, but it was a space that belonged only to me, free from associations with Andrew or his family. There I began the slow process of rebuilding my sense of security and autonomy. Andrew and I communicated primarily through text, occasional phone calls, and one carefully structured session with a couples therapist. He was by all appearances doing the work, continuing his individual therapy, giving me the space I had requested, providing full transparency about his conversations with his parents. "I told them I won't be attending family gatherings for the foreseeable future," he informed me during one of our calls, "that I need to focus on whether I can save my marriage and what that would require of me." "How did they take that?" I asked, genuinely curious about their reaction. "Not well," he admitted. "Dad accused me of choosing that woman over blood. Mum cried and said I was breaking her heart, but I held firm for once. It was a small step, but significant, for someone who had spent his entire life avoiding conflict with his parents." Richard and Margaret made several attempts to contact me directly. Calls, emails, even a handwritten note delivered to my office with a bouquet of expensive flowers. All contained carefully crafted non-apologies. "We regret any misunderstanding. Our intentions were never to cause harm. Family matters should remain private." I ignored them all. Eliza surprisingly sent a brief but seemingly sincere text. "I didn't know what they were planning. Not really. But I should have questioned why they suddenly wanted me to engage with you about your work. I'm sorry." Jackson and I maintained cautious contact, meeting occasionally for coffee to discuss developments. He had fully broken ties with Richard, refusing further IT consultation work and declining family event invitations. "It's surprisingly liberating," he told me during one of our meetings. "Like I've been carrying this weight of obligation my whole life, and suddenly it's gone." I understood exactly what he meant. 3 weeks after the Sunday lunch that had changed everything, I agreed to meet Andrew at our apartment. It was time to see if I could face that space, those memories, without being overwhelmed by betrayal. It was also time to make some decisions. The apartment looked both familiar and strange as I entered. The furniture, artwork, and decorations all exactly where they had been when I left, yet somehow different, without my daily presence. Andrew had clearly cleaned thoroughly in anticipation of my visit, the scent of lemon polish hanging in the air. "Can I get you anything?" he asked awkwardly as we stood in the entryway, suddenly strangers in the home we had shared. "Coffee, tea?" "No, thank you," I replied, moving into the living room and choosing the armchair rather than my usual spot on the sofa beside him. "I can't stay long." He nodded, sitting on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped between his knees. "Thank you for coming, for being willing to talk in person." I studied him carefully, noting the changes of the past 3 weeks. He looked more rested than during our park meeting, but also different in a way I couldn't immediately identify. After a moment, I realized what it was. Without his family's influence, without the constant pressure of maintaining their approval while hiding their manipulations from me, he seemed more present, more authentic. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I began, "about us, about what happened, about what it means for our future." "So have I," he said quickly. "Violeta, I held up a hand, stopping him. "Please let me finish. This isn't easy for me." He nodded, pressing his lips together. "What happened wasn't just a betrayal of trust," I continued. "It was a revelation of patterns I should have seen long ago. Your family never accepted me as a person, only as a potential asset. And you, despite loving me, enabled their behavior because confronting it was too difficult, too uncomfortable." Andrew looked down at his hands, not denying my assessment. "I've realized something important," I said. "My value isn't determined by how useful I am to others. Not to your family, not to Navaris, not even to you. I deserve respect and honesty simply because I'm a human being deserving of those things." "You do," he agreed softly. "You absolutely do. The question now is whether we can build something new from these ashes. Not returning to what we had, because what we had was built on secrets and compromise, but creating something healthier, more honest, more equal." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "I'm not ready to give up on our marriage entirely. Despite everything, I still love you, but love isn't enough. I need to know that you're capable of real change, of maintaining boundaries with your family, of being a true partner, rather than a mediator between me and them." Andrew leaned forward, his expression intensely focused. "I want that too. I've been learning a lot in therapy about family systems, about how I was conditioned to prioritize my parents' needs and approval above everything else, about how I learned to manage my own anxiety by managing other people's emotions instead of setting healthy boundaries." It was the most insightful self-reflection I'd heard from him, suggesting the therapy was indeed having an impact. "I spoke with Dad's lawyer yesterday," he continued. "The SEC investigation is serious. They have evidence of multiple instances of securities fraud going back years. Dad could face criminal charges." "I'm sorry," I said and meant it. Whatever Richard had done, I took no joy in his potential downfall. "Don't be. It's the consequence of his actions," Andrew replied with surprising firmness. "What I regret is how long I was complicit through my silence, how I allowed his behavior to contaminate our marriage." "And your mother, how is she handling this?" "In typical Margaret fashion, maintaining appearances while falling apart behind closed doors. She's already planning how to spin this socially, how to present themselves as victims of overzealous regulators or business rivals." There was a new clarity in Andrew's assessment of his parents, a willingness to see them as they were, rather than as he wished them to be. "I've made some decisions," he said. "Regardless of what happens with us, I'm establishing clear boundaries with my family. No more financial entanglements. I'm selling my shares in Dad's company and returning any investment funds he provided. No more information sharing. They don't get details about my work, my finances, or my personal life without explicit permission." These were significant steps for someone who had been enmeshed with his family his entire life. "And us?" I asked. "What are your thoughts about our future?" "I want to rebuild," he said without hesitation, "but on your terms, at your pace. I know I've broken your trust, and I know words aren't enough to restore it. I'm prepared to prove through consistent actions that I can be the partner you deserve." I nodded, considering his words. "I'm not moving back in, not yet, but I'm willing to try a structured reconciliation process, continued couples therapy, regular date nights to reconnect, complete transparency about family interactions." "Dang." The relief on his face was palpable. "Yes, to all of it. Whatever you need. And one more thing, I added. If we do rebuild this marriage, your parents can't be part of our lives until they take full responsibility for their actions and make genuine amends. Not just to me, but to everyone they've harmed through their schemes." This was the hardest boundary, the one that would truly test his commitment to change. In the past, Andrew would have resisted, would have sought a compromise that let everyone save face. But now he simply nodded. I understand, and I agree. He hesitated, then added, I've already told them something similar, that our relationship depends on their willingness to take responsibility and change. They didn't take it well. I wouldn't expect them to, I said. Change is difficult, especially for people who've spent decades justifying their behavior. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of decisions made, and yet to be made hanging between us. What happens now? Andrew finally asked. Now we take small steps, I replied. Regular therapy, defined interactions, building new patterns to replace the broken ones. I stood, indicating the visit was concluding. I can't promise where this will lead, Andrew. I can only promise to try as long as you're demonstrating real change. That's all I'm asking for, he said, rising as well, a chance to prove myself. As I prepared to leave, he asked hesitantly, would you be willing to have dinner this weekend? Nothing fancy, just a start. I considered the request, weighing my lingering hurt against the potential for healing. Yes, I decided, but somewhere new, not our usual places. A clean slate, he agreed. Thank you, Violetta, for your willingness to try. I know I don't deserve it. This isn't about what you deserve, I told him honestly. It's about what I want and need. And right now, I need to know if what we had was real, if it can be salvaged, or if I need to move on. As I left our apartment, still ours technically, though it no longer felt like mine, I realized I was approaching this reconciliation attempt differently than I would have before. I wasn't trying to fix Andrew or our marriage out of fear of failure or concern for appearances. I was making a clear-eyed choice based on my own needs and boundaries. Whatever the outcome, I would emerge stronger, more authentic, more committed to my own worth. The text message that had exposed Richard and Margaret's scheme had also freed me from patterns I hadn't even recognized were constraining me. Sometimes I reflected as I walked away from the building that had been my home. The most important messages aren't the ones that tell us what others are doing to us, but the ones that reveal what we've been doing to ourselves. 1 year later, I stood in my office at Novaris, now Senior Vice President of Marketing, after a well-deserved promotion, looking out at the Manhattan skyline as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city. So much had changed since that fateful Sunday lunch, both professionally and personally. The SEC investigation into Richard Hudson's business practices had resulted in significant penalties, though he had managed to avoid criminal charges through a settlement agreement. His company had survived, but was a shadow of its former self, with many clients and partners distancing themselves once the details became public. The Hudson family's social standing had suffered similarly, their invitations to elite events suddenly becoming scarce. Margaret had doubled down on image management, presenting herself as the loyal wife, standing by her misunderstood husband. Eliza had initially followed her mother's lead, but had eventually shown surprising independence, reaching out to me several times with increasingly sincere apologies and even attending therapy to address her own role in family dynamics. Jackson Whitfield had become an unexpected friend and ally. His IT security consultancy was thriving, built on a reputation for integrity that stood in stark contrast to his uncle's business practices. We met for coffee monthly, comparing notes on our respective journeys away from toxic family influences. And Andrew, that was the most complex evolution of all. Our reconciliation process had been slow, deliberate, and at times painfully honest. Twice-weekly sessions with a couples therapist specializing in betrayal trauma. Structured date nights where certain topics were off-limits to allow reconnection without pressure. A detailed transparency agreement regarding any contact with his family. The breakthrough had to come 4 months after our separation, during an intensely emotional therapy session, when Andrew had finally fully confronted the depth of his betrayal. I didn't just fail to protect you, he had admitted, tears streaming down his face. I actively participated in using you. I prioritized my parents' approval over your well-being, over your career, over your freedom. And I did it because I was afraid. Afraid of their disapproval, afraid of standing on my own, afraid of being the man I pretended to be. That raw honesty, coupled with the consistent behavioral changes he had been demonstrating, had marked a turning point in our reconciliation. 2 months later, I had moved back into our apartment. Not the same one where the betrayal had occurred, but a new place we had chosen together, free from Richard's financial entanglements or painful memories. Andrew had maintained his boundaries with his parents, having minimal contact, except for brief supervised visits that always included me, and were contingent on their respectful behaviour. Richard had struggled with this arrangement, occasionally testing boundaries with manipulation attempts that were now met with firm consequences rather than acquiescence. I never realised how much energy I spent managing their emotions and expectations, Andrew had observed after one such encounter. No wonder I had so little left for our relationship. My thoughts were interrupted by a knock on my office door. My assistant poked her head in, reminding me of the time. "Your husband's here to pick you up," she said with a smile. "Should I send him in?" "Yes, thank you, Lisa." Andrew entered a moment later, looking relaxed and confident in a way he rarely had before our separation. The past year of intensive therapy, boundary setting, and honest self-reflection had transformed him from someone constantly seeking external validation to a man comfortable in his own identity. "Ready for dinner?" he asked, crossing the room to kiss me lightly. "Jackson and Emily are already at the restaurant. Just let me grab my bag," I replied, shutting down my computer. As we walked toward the elevator, Andrew's phone buzzed. He checked it briefly, then silenced it with a small shake of his head. "Your father," I guessed, recognizing his expression. "Yes, wanting to know if we'll be at Eliza's birthday dinner next weekend." He slipped the phone back into his pocket. "I already told him our decision on that. He's just hoping for a different answer if he asks again." "And how do you feel about it?" I asked, watching him carefully. These moments were still tests of his growth, of his ability to maintain healthy boundaries. "Disappointed that he's still trying to manipulate rather than respect our decision," Andrew replied thoughtfully as we entered the elevator, "but not guilty or anxious like I would have been before. His feelings about our choices are his responsibility, not mine." I smiled, squeezing his hand. This was the partner I had always hoped for, someone who could stand firmly in his own values while remaining compassionate. "I'm proud of you," I told him sincerely. The elevator doors opened and we stepped out into the lobby, together, equal partners in a relationship that had been broken but rebuilt stronger than before. As we exited the building into the crisp autumn air, I thought about the anonymous text that had started this journey of discovery and transformation. "Don't react. They're recording you." A warning that had seemed catastrophic at the time, but had ultimately led to liberation from patterns that had constrained us both. Sometimes the most damaging recordings aren't the ones captured on devices, but the ones played on repeat in our minds. The limiting beliefs, the toxic patterns, the false narratives about our worth and what we deserve. I had learned to stop those recordings to replace them with healthier messages about boundaries, self-worth, and authentic connection. Andrew had learned to author his own life story rather than following his parents' script. Together we had created something new and genuine from the ashes of betrayal. Trust once broken is never quite the same when restored. It becomes something different, more conscious, more deliberate, more precious for having been lost and found again. Like a broken bone that heals stronger at the fracture point, our relationship now had a resilience. It had lacked before a hard-won wisdom about what truly matters. As we walked hand in hand toward the restaurant where friends awaited us, I reflected on how far we had come and the lessons learned along the way, that true love requires courage and honesty, that healthy boundaries are not walls but foundations, that sometimes the most difficult texts to receive are the ones that force us to see uncomfortable truths, and that rebuilding after betrayal isn't about returning to what was, but about creating what could be. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something wasn't right in a relationship? That moment when you realized someone you trusted wasn't being honest with you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. How did you handle it? Did you walk away, or did you find a way to rebuild trust? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences and lessons learned the hard way. Sharing this video might help someone else who's struggling with betrayal or difficult family dynamics. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, sometimes the most painful moments in our lives become the catalysts for our greatest growth. Until next time, trust your instincts and know your worth.